With all this virus panic around, perhaps we need some perspective. Eddie Jacques died. He was aged 101. He was the author of a memoir calling himself the happiest man on earth, which is amazing to me because he is a Jew who the Nazis sent to Auschwitz in World War II. His parents were both gassed to death there. He himself miraculously survived. Eddie then found his way to Sydney, made a life here.
I woke up after 7 days in a coma. When I woke up, I said, if I make it out from this hospital, I'll be the happiest, the kindest, the most polite and active person in the world.
Today, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg paid a tribute to him in the Daily Telegraph. The Treasurer joins me now. Josh Frydenberg, what moved you so much about the death of Eddie Jacques?
He was a giant of man, Andrew, somebody who had seen the worst of mankind, but he didn't let that stop him. He devoted his life to educating others about the dangers of intolerance and the importance of love and hope. And his story was a story of survival. He was born in 1920 in Leipzig, Germany, and he said his family were very proud Germans. They were German first and second, and then Jewish thereafter. Yet because of his religion, the Nazis came after him. He was bashed within an inch of his life on the night of Kristallnacht in 1938, the night of the broken glass, when the Nazis looted German Jewish businesses and synagogues. He ended up spending time incarcerated in the concentration camps of Auschwitz and Buchenwald. And so many times he nearly lost his life. Yet he did survive. He was rescued by the Americans in 1945. In 1950, he came to Australia. He started a family. And then he was a founding member of the Sydney Jewish Museum. And he spent his time taking school groups around those exhibits about the time of the Holocaust. And he was determined that the next generation be a force for good and that they understood the lessons to be learnt from the terrible past, the darkest moment in humanity, the Holocaust.
But with all that his family had suffered and how, and his parents dying, how could he be the happiest man on earth?
Well, in fact, for decades, he could not talk about the sorrow and the darkness of his time during the Holocaust. But it was with the birth of his first son that he just regained his love of life. And then he became, as he said, somebody with a smile on his face, just appreciating his lucky lot in life, finding a beautiful wife, Flore, who was his wife for 75 years. And what an amazing long life he had, living to 101. And then he put it all down in print, aged 100, and was Autobiography of the Year here in Australia. It was an international bestseller. And I was so moved by the book when I first read it that I reached out to him and met him. And once you met this gentle but strong person, you realised that you were in the presence of something very, very special. And I wanted other people to read that story, Andrew, so I got copies of the book and sent them to all my colleagues, regardless of their political persuasion. And a number of them have since been in touch with me following Eddie's death, saying they read the book, it impacted them greatly, and now they understand more about the Holocaust and the lessons to be learned.
Well, your own family were lucky to escape the Holocaust, skin of the teeth job. What do you think we should learn from Eddie, from the whole thing? What is it that moves you so much?
Well, he encapsulates it well when he says, if we don't learn from the past, then we have no future. And what we saw during the Holocaust was an intense hatred and intolerance. And that took a very cultured people, the German people, who loved literature, who loved fine music, and who then turned on their fellow citizen. And by the way, it wasn't just the 6 million Jews and tragically 1.5 million children who lost their lives at the hands of this brutal Nazi killing machine, but it was disabled, homosexuals, Roma, Sinti, Jehovah Witnesses, political dissidents. And I think what we can learn from the period of the Holocaust is, despite one's intelligence or despite one's culture, despite one's education, you can find your way, or a people can find their way on this terrible, terrible pathway to depravity. And that's what we saw during the Holocaust. And so therefore, we have a collective duty to say never again. And one of the things I'm very proud of that the Morrison government has heavily invested in, Andrew, is setting up Holocaust museums in every state and territory. We've partnered with the Palaszczuk government. We've partnered with the McGowan government. We're partnering with the Andrews government. We're partnering with the New South Wales government. And Dom Perrottet himself has went to visit Eddie Jaku prior to his death. And so we're partnering with all these governments, including in the ACT, with Andrew Barr and Peter Gutwin in Tasmania and Stephen Marshall in South Australia.
That's
and
good.
we're setting up these museums so that the younger generation, who may have very few have had very few opportunities to learn about the Holocaust, that they can learn more. And that's why it's so important.
Look, mate, if I only wish these lessons were ingrained a little deeper, because, as you know, we've talked about this privately as well. The rise of anti-Semitism is really shocking, particularly in the left, and I really fear for the future.